Randy Mason's diplomatic status had never been put to the test quite like this. The human envoy found himself face to face with a bedraggled Edosian female, her large eyes wide with fear as she cowered behind him. Pursuing her were 3 Edosian authorities, their uniform markings indicating they belonged to the capital city's law enforcement. "Step aside, human," the lead officer demanded, his tentacles writhing with impatience. "This vagrant is wanted for theft and disturbing the peace." Randy stood his ground, acutely aware of the implications his next words could have on interspecies relations. "I'm invoking diplomatic protection for this individual," he declared, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "Any grievances against her can be addressed through proper channels at the human embassy." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of frustration and uncertainty. After a moment of tense silence, they retreated, leaving Randy alone with the trembling Edosian female in the grimy alleyway of the capital's slums. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm Vler." Randy nodded, taking in her malnourished form and tattered clothing. "I'm Randy Mason. Let's get you somewhere safe." The human embassy compound stood as a beacon of Earth architecture amidst the swirling spires of Edosian design. Randy ushered Vler into his living quarters, keenly aware of the curious glances from his human colleagues. As the door slid shut behind them, he finally allowed himself to exhale. "You're safe now," he assured her, gesturing towards the food synthesizer. "Let's get you something to eat and some clean clothes." As Vler devoured a nutrient-rich meal, Randy tended to her visible injuries with a med kit. The more he interacted with her, the more he noticed peculiarities in her behavior. Despite her ragged appearance, her posture was impeccable, and her knowledge of Edosian customs seemed far too refined for someone who claimed to have lived on the streets for months. "How did you end up in this situation?" Randy asked gently, applying a dermal regenerator to a nasty cut on her arm. Vler's gaze dropped to the floor. "I escaped from an abusive household. I couldn't bear it any longer." Randy's heart ached with sympathy, but a nagging suspicion tugged at the back of his mind. Before he could probe further, his comm unit chirped urgently. The message that flashed across the screen made his blood run cold. "Urgent. Missing Edosian royal, Princess Zorleth, believed to have fled arranged marriage. All diplomatic personnel on high alert. Rumors of human involvement in her disappearance. Extreme caution advised." Randy's eyes darted between the message and Vler, who was now examining the room with an air of curiosity that seemed at odds with her supposed background. The stakes had just skyrocketed, and he found himself at the center of a potential diplomatic crisis. As he contemplated his next move, Vler shifted and her tattered sleeve slipped down her shoulder. There, stark against her pale blue skin, was a birthmark, a swirling pattern that matched the description of the royal marking of Princess Zorleth. Randy's breath caught in his throat. The poor alien girl he had saved was indeed the royal princess, and now he was harboring her in the heart of the human embassy. With Edosian intelligence likely already surveilling the compound and tensions rising between their species, Randy realized he was walking a dangerous tightrope between his growing feelings for Vler and his duty to maintain interstellar peace. As Vler, or Princess Zorleth, met his gaze, Randy knew that his actions in the coming hours would shape the future of human-Edosian relations. The slums of the capital had yielded an unexpected treasure, and now the fate of 2 worlds rested in his hands. Randy's mind raced as he processed the gravity of his discovery. The birthmark on Vler's shoulder left no doubt. She was Princess Zorleth, the missing Edosian royal. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "Is everything all right?" Vler asked, her large eyes filled with concern. Randy forced a smile. "Yes, just thinking about our next steps. You should rest now. We'll talk more in the morning." As Vler settled into the guest quarters, Randy retreated to his room. Sleep eluded him that night as he weighed his options. The diplomatic part of his brain screamed at him to report his findings immediately, but something deeper, a growing affection for Vler and a nagging sense that there was more to her story, held him back. By dawn, Randy had made his decision. He would keep Vler's secret, at least until he understood the full picture. The following days saw Randy juggling his regular duties with discreet research into the Adosian royal family. He scoured databases and diplomatic records, piecing together a troubling picture. Genetic modifications, Randy muttered, staring at his datapad. The proposed alliance would require Princess Zor Leith to undergo extensive biological alterations to bear offspring with the alien species. The risks were staggering. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the capital grew tenser by the hour. Randy watched from his office window as Adosian security forces increased their patrols. Citizens hurried through the streets, casting wary glances at the human embassy. "Mason," a voice called. Randy turned to see Ambassador Marcus Holbrook striding towards him. "We've got a situation. The Adosians are implementing random searches of diplomatic residences. They're citing a terrorist threat, but we both know what they're really after." Randy's heart rate spiked. "How should we proceed, sir?" "Cooperate for now. We can't afford to escalate tensions further. And Mason, I need you to lead a joint human-Adosian task force to investigate the princess's disappearance." Randy nodded, hoping his face didn't betray the turmoil within. "Of course, Ambassador. I'll get right on it." Back in his quarters, Randy found Vler poring over a human cultural guide. Her quick mind had absorbed an impressive amount of information about Earth customs and colloquialisms. "Remember," Randy instructed, "if anyone asks, you're from the southern slums. You've been on the streets for months after escaping an abusive household." Vler nodded, her posture subtly shifting to match her new persona. "Got it. So what's the plan now?" Randy sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been assigned to lead the search for, you. It's not ideal, but it might give us an advantage. I'll know their moves before they make them." As days passed, Randy's double life grew increasingly complex. By day, he led the task force, strategically misdirecting the search. By night, he and Vler grew closer, sharing stories of their vastly different upbringings. One evening, as they shared a meal in his quarters, Vler's laugh at one of Randy's jokes was cut short by a knock at the door. They froze, exchanging panicked glances. "Mason, it's Holbrook. We need to talk." Randy motioned for Vler to hide in the bedroom. Heart pounding, he opened the door. Ambassador Holbrook's piercing gaze swept the room. "You've been spending a lot of time here lately. Is everything all right?" Randy nodded, perhaps too quickly. "Yes, sir, just focusing on the investigation." Holbrook's eyes narrowed, but he didn't press further. "Very well. There's a task force meeting tomorrow morning. Prince Vler will be joining us." After Holbrook left, Randy slumped against the door, exhaling slowly. The close call had made one thing clear. Keeping Vler in the embassy was becoming too risky. The next morning, Randy found himself face-to-face with Prince Vler. The Adosian royal's demeanor surprised him. Instead of the cold, authoritative figure he expected, Vler seemed genuinely distressed. "Please," the prince implored, his tentacles curling with worry, "if you have any leads on my sister's whereabouts, I beg you to share them. Her safety is our primary concern." Randy's certainty wavered. This didn't align with Vler's claims of an uncaring family. As doubts crept in, he realized he needed to hear Vler's full story. That night, Randy enlisted his friend and fellow diplomat, Jack Hawkins, to help move Vler to a safe house on the outskirts of the capital. As they navigated the dimly lit streets, the whine of an Adosian patrol vehicle sent them ducking into an alley. "That was too close," Jack whispered as the patrol passed. Once safely in the house, Randy turned to Vler. "I think it's time you told me everything. Why did you really run away?" Vler's shoulders slumped. "My family, they're not physically abusive, but they've always seen me as a political tool. The arranged marriage was the final straw. It wasn't just about losing my freedom. It could kill me." As Vler continued her story, Randy's comm unit buzzed. The message from Ambassador Holbrook made his blood run cold. The Adosians had issued an ultimatum. Find the princess in 48 hours, or all human diplomats would be expelled. Randy looked at Vler, his mind racing. The fate of two worlds now hung in the balance, and he had less than 2 days to find a solution that would save both the princess and the fragile human-Adosian alliance. As night fell over the alien capital, Randy began formulating a plan. It was risky, with potential for catastrophic failure, but it was their only chance. He only hoped it wouldn't be too late. Randy's mind raced as he stared at the message from Ambassador Holbrook. The 48-hour ultimatum loomed over him like a shadow, threatening to engulf everything he had worked for. He glanced at Vler, who was curled up on the couch, her eyes fixed on a human cultural guide. "We need to move," Randy said, his voice tight with urgency. "I have a plan, but it's risky." Vler looked up, her large eyes filled with concern. "What kind of plan?" Randy took a deep breath. "I'm going to meet with your brother, Prince Kelvaran." Vler's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Randy, no! He'll have you arrested!" "It's our only chance," Randy insisted. "We need to find a solution that works for everyone, or we're looking at a diplomatic disaster." As dawn broke over the Adosian capital, Randy made his way to the royal palace. His heart pounded as he was escorted to a private chamber where Prince Kelvaran waited. The Adosian royal's tentacles were coiled tightly, a sign of distress. "Diplomat Mason, I hope you bring news of my sister." Randy steeled himself. "Your Highness, I do, but before I reveal her location, I need you to hear the full story." Over the next hour, Randy explained everything. Vler's fears about the arranged marriage, the dangerous genetic modifications required, and her desire to make a difference for her people beyond political obligations. Kelvaran's expression shifted from shock to understanding. I had no idea she felt this way. The genetic modifications, I wasn't aware of the risks." "Your Highness, we need to find a solution that ensures Vler's safety and preserves our alliance," Randy urged. "I have some ideas, if you're willing to listen." As Randy and Kelvaran began their clandestine negotiations, Vler was growing restless in the safe house. The walls seemed to close in on her, and the desire to see her people, the real Adosians, not just the royal court, overwhelmed her caution. Disguising herself with a hooded cloak and some clever makeup, Vler slipped out of the safe house. She made her way to a nearby Adosian settlement, her heart racing with every step. The sights and sounds of everyday Adosian life assaulted her senses. She saw families struggling to make ends meet, workers toiling in harsh conditions, and children playing with makeshift toys. It was a far cry from the opulence of the royal palace. As she watched a group of Adosians queue for basic rations, Vler's determination strengthened. She knew she had to find a way to help her people, to bridge the gap between the royal elite and the struggling masses. Her reverie was broken by the sound of an approaching patrol. Vler's heart raced as she ducked into an alley, narrowly avoiding detection. The close call sent adrenaline coursing through her body, and she realized the true gravity of her situation. Her actions weren't just affecting her anymore. They had implications for human-Adosian relations and Randy's career. With restored dedication, Vler hurried back to the safe house. She had much to think about. Meanwhile, at the embassy, Randy and Prince Kelvaran were deep in negotiations. They had been working tirelessly for hours, fueled by drive and copious amounts of Adosian stimulant tea. "What if," Randy suggested, his voice hoarse from talking, "instead of an arranged marriage, we propose a cultural exchange program? It could foster stronger, long-lasting ties between our species without putting the princess at risk." Kelvaran's tentacles unfurled slightly, a sign of interest. "Go on." As they delved into the details of this new proposal, a commotion outside the chamber caught their attention. The door burst open, revealing a tall, imposing figure with iridescent scales and multiple eyes. "Ambassador Crixthal," Kelvaran said, his tone wary, "what brings you to Ados?" The Zorger ambassador's eyes narrowed. "I demand to know why the arranged marriage has been delayed. Our alliance hangs in the balance." Randy felt the delicate diplomatic web he'd been weaving begin to unravel. The unexpected arrival of the Zorgar threatened to derail everything. As tensions rose in the chamber, Ambassador Holbrook was growing increasingly suspicious of Randy's behavior. He summoned his chief of security. "I want a detail assigned to Diplomat Mason," Holbrook ordered. "Monitor his movements, but be discreet. Something's not right, and I intend to find out what it is." The added security made it increasingly difficult for Randy to communicate with Vler or continue his negotiations with Vler without raising alarm. He felt the pressure mounting from all sides. Back at the safe house, Vler had begun channeling her restless energy into writing. She documented her experiences among the common Edotians, her insights into the struggles they faced, and her vision for a more equitable society. As she wrote, her manifesto took shape, a blueprint for an Edosian future that balanced tradition with progress, royal duty with social responsibility. Randy, acutely aware of the dwindling time, knew he needed to act fast. He formulated a plan to stage a rescue of the princess, allowing her to return with dignity while avoiding suspicion of human involvement in her disappearance. As he prepared to put this plan into motion, his comm unit buzzed. It was Jack Hawkins, his voice urgent and breathless. "Randy, we've got a problem. The safe house has been compromised. Edosian authorities are closing in on Vler's location. You need to get here now." Randy's blood ran cold. Without hesitation, he commandeered a diplomatic vehicle and sped towards the safe house. The streets of the Edosian capital blurred past as he pushed the vehicle to its limits. In the distance, he could see the flashing lights of Edosian patrol vehicles. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he realized the next few moments would determine not only Vler's fate, but also the future of human-Edosian relations and his own career. As he approached the safe house, his mind raced through possible scenarios and contingency plans. The weight of two worlds rested on his shoulders, and failure was not an option. Randy brought the vehicle to a screeching halt outside the safe house. He could hear the wail of Edosian sirens growing louder. Time was running out. With a deep breath, he stepped out of the vehicle and rushed towards the building, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Everything he had worked for. The sound of his racing heartbeat nearly drowned out the roar of the engine as he sped through the Edosian capital's winding streets. Suddenly, Randy's progress came to an abrupt halt. A sea of bodies filled the road ahead, stretching as far as he could see. Thousands of Edosians packed the streets, their tentacles waving protest signs and their voices raised in a cacophony of chants. "No more hunger, no more poverty," the cries echoed off the towering buildings. Randy's grip tightened on the steering wheel. This was unexpected and potentially disastrous. He scanned the crowd, searching for a way through, but the mass of bodies was impenetrable. With a frustrated growl, he abandoned the vehicle and plunged into the throng. The press of alien bodies surrounded him, their scaly skin brushing against him as he fought his way forward. The acrid smell of Edosian sweat filled his nostrils, mingling with the metallic tang of the city air. Meanwhile, at the safe house, Vler's sensitive hearing picked up the approaching whine of Edosian patrol vehicles. Her heart raced as she gathered her belongings, fingers fumbling with the pages of her hastily written manifesto. "This way, Your Highness," Jack Hawkins urged, guiding her to a hidden panel in the wall. It slid open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. "This will lead you to safety." Vler nodded, her throat tight with fear and gratitude. She ducked into the passage, the damp coolness enveloping her as the panel closed behind her. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the confined space as she hurried forward, clutching her writings to her chest. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, but finally, Vler saw a glimmer of light ahead. She emerged into a narrow alley, blinking in the sudden brightness. The roar of voices hit her like a physical force, and she realized she had stumbled into the midst of a massive protest. Vler pulled her hood lower, trying to blend in with the crowd. Her eyes widened as she caught snatches of conversation around her. The protesters were calling for the very reform she had envisioned in her manifesto. Across the square, Randy pushed through the dense crowd, his eyes darting from face to face. A flash of familiar movement caught his attention, the distinctive way Vler's tentacles curled when she was nervous. He had found her. "Vler," he called out, but his voice was lost in the din. Before he could reach her, a platoon of Edosian authorities arrived at the scene. Their hover vehicles cast ominous shadows over the crowd as they descended. Panic rippled through the protesters, and in the ensuing chaos, Randy lost sight of Vler. "The princess, it's Princess Vler." The cry went up from somewhere in the crowd. Vler froze, her heart's pounding. How had they recognized her? She realized her hood had slipped back in the commotion. To her amazement, instead of anger or fear, the crowd's reaction was one of jubilation. The chants shifted, her name rising from thousands of throats. Vler! 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 Caught up in the moment, feeling the energy of the crowd and the weight of her convictions, Vler made a decision. She stepped forward, letting her disguise fall away completely. "My people," she called out, her voice ringing clear over the square. "I have walked among you. I have seen your struggles, and I stand with you in your fight for a better Eidos." The crowd roared its approval. Vler's words flowed freely now, sharing her vision of a more equitable society, of a royal family that truly served its people. Randy watched in a mix of awe and horror. This impromptu speech could either save them or doom them all. He pulled out his comm unit, fingers flying over the keys as he sent urgent messages to Prince Kelvaran and Ambassador Holbrook. Situation critical. Princess addressing protesters in Central Square. Come immediately. As Vler continued to speak, a new commotion arose at the edge of the crowd. Ambassador Crixus Thal had arrived, his Zorgar security detail pushing roughly through the Edotians. "Seize the princess!" Crix Thal's voice boomed across the square. "She is bound by contract to the Zorgar Empire." The crowd's mood shifted instantly from celebration to outrage. They formed a protective circle around Vler, tentacles linked in defiance. Randy saw his chance. He shoved his way through the last few rows of Edotians, placing himself squarely between Vler and the advancing Zorgar. "Ambassador Crix Thal," Randy called out, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I invoke diplomatic immunity on behalf of Princess Vler. Any aggressive action will be considered an act of war against both Eidos and Earth." Crix Thal's multiple eyes narrowed dangerously. "You overstep your bounds, human." The standoff stretched on, tension crackling in the air. Then a new voice cut through the silence. "That will not be necessary, Ambassador Crix Thal." Prince Kelvaran strode into the square, flanked by his royal guards. The crowd parted before him, murmuring in surprise and anticipation. To everyone's shock, instead of ordering Vler's arrest, Kelvaran embraced his sister. "My people," he announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed square. "I have heard your cries for change, and I have heard my sister's wisdom. Together, we will forge a new path for Eidos." As Kelvaran outlined the cultural exchange program he and Randy had developed, Ambassador Holbrook arrived on the scene. The impromptu diplomatic summit that followed was unlike anything in the annals of interstellar relations. Hours later, as the last rays of Eidos' sun painted the sky in vibrant hues, a tentative agreement had been reached. The crowd had dispersed peacefully, hope replacing anger in their hearts. Randy and Vler found a quiet moment amidst the whirlwind of activity. They stood close, not quite touching, as they watched the sunset. "What happens now?" Vler asked softly. Randy turned to her, taking in the way the fading light played across her iridescent scales. "Now, we build something new. Together." Their eyes met, volumes passing unspoken between them. The challenges ahead were daunting, but for the first time since this wild adventure began, the future held promise instead of fear. As night fell over the Edotian capital, Randy and Vler walked side by side towards the palace. The real work was just beginning, but they were ready to face it, one step at a time. As night fell over the Edotian capital, Randy and Vler walked side by side towards the palace. The real work was just beginning, but they were ready to face it, one step at a time. The following week saw Randy and Vler diving headfirst into the implementation of the cultural exchange program. They spent long hours in meetings, drafting proposals, and coordinating with various Edotian, human, and Zorgar representatives. Their efforts were met with initial enthusiasm, particularly among the younger Eidosians who craved new experiences and connections with other species. However, as the program began to take shape, resistance emerged from unexpected quarters. Lord Kaznar, a prominent Eidosian noble with a reputation for traditionalism, led a vocal opposition against the initiative. This so-called cultural exchange is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to dilute our proud Eidosian heritage, Kaznar declared during a heated session of the Royal Council. His tentacles quivered with awe-inspiring anger as he addressed the assembled nobles. We cannot allow our youth to be corrupted by alien influences. Randy watched from the sidelines, his mind focused as he listened to Kaznar's inflammatory rhetoric. He glanced at Vler, who sat rigidly in her seat, her iridescent scales dulled with stress. The conservative faction's propaganda campaign gained traction among certain segments of the population. Posters appeared throughout the capital, depicting grotesque caricatures of humans, and Zorgar looming menacingly over cowering Adotians. The message was clear. The cultural exchange program would lead to the erosion of Adosian values and customs. As if the internal resistance wasn't enough, the Zorgar delegation added another layer of complexity to the situation. Ambassador Crixthal requested a private meeting with Prince Kelvaron, Randy, and Vler. In the opulent conference room of the royal palace, Crixthal's multiple eyes narrowed as he spoke. While we appreciate the creative solution you've proposed, the Zorgar Empire requires more tangible benefits from this arrangement. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? Randy asked, his tone carefully neutral. Crixthal's scaled hand swept across a holographic map of the Adosian system. We demand exclusive mining rights on Eidos' third moon, Luxara. Consider it a gesture of good faith on your part. The room fell silent. Randy could practically hear the gears turning in Prince Kelvaran's mind as he weighed the potential consequences of such a concession. Vler broke the silence, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Ambassador Crixthal, surely you understand that such a request goes far beyond the scope of our cultural exchange program. We need time to consider the broader implications. Crixthal's lips curled into what might have been a smile on a less reptilian face. Of course, Your Highness, but do remember, time is a luxury we may not have in abundance. The implied threat hung in the air long after the Zorgar delegation had left. In response to the mounting challenges, Randy and Vler redoubled their efforts to win over the Adosian public. They organized a series of open forums across the capital, inviting citizens to voice their concerns and learn more about the cultural exchange program. During one such event in a bustling market square, Randy stood before a diverse crowd of Adosians. This program isn't about replacing Adosian culture, he explained, his voice amplified by a translator device. It's about enriching it through mutual understanding and shared experiences. As he spoke, Randy noticed a commotion at the edge of the crowd. A hooded figure pushed through the throng, moving with purpose towards the makeshift stage. Randy's instincts, honed by years of diplomatic service, screamed danger. Time seemed to slow as the figure reached into its cloak. Randy caught a glint of metal, a weapon. Without hesitation, he lunged towards Vler, who stood at the edge of the stage, oblivious to the approaching threat. "Vler, down!" Randy shouted, tackling her to the ground just as a high-pitched whine filled the air. A bolt of energy sizzled overhead, leaving a scorch mark on the wall behind them. Chaos erupted in the square. Royal guards swarmed the would-be assassin, subduing him as panicked Adosians fled in all directions. Randy lay on the ground, his body shielding Vler. A searing pain in his side told him he hadn't entirely escaped the attack. He looked down at Vler, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Are you all right?" he managed to ask through gritted teeth. Vler nodded, her tentacles wrapping gently around Randy's arm. "Thanks to you," she whispered. As the royal guard secured the area and medical teams rushed in, Randy's vision began to blur. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Vler's face, etched with concern, framed by the chaotic scene around them. The assassination attempt sent shockwaves through Adosian society. As Randy recovered in the palace's medical wing, reports flooded in of widespread demonstrations in support of Vler and the cultural exchange program. The sight of their beloved princess in danger had galvanized public opinion, turning many former skeptics into ardent supporters. However, the attack also brought increased scrutiny and security measures. Randy found his movements heavily restricted once he was well enough to leave the medical wing. Armed guards shadowed him and Vler wherever they went, making it difficult to continue their grassroots outreach efforts. Vler, driven by a mix of gratitude for Randy's actions and a renewed sense of purpose, took on a more prominent role in promoting the program. She began incorporating ideas from her earlier manifesto into her speeches, calling for broader social reforms alongside the cultural exchange initiative. The attempt on my life has only strengthened my determination, Vler declared in a planet-wide broadcast. We must move forward, not backwards. The cultural exchange program is just the first step towards a more open, equitable Eidos. Her words resonated with many common Eidosians, who saw in Vler a champion for change. However, it also deepened the rift with the conservative nobility, who now viewed her as a radical threat to the established order. As tensions on Eidos continued to simmer, a new crisis loomed on the horizon. Reports came in of increased Zorgar fleet activity near Eidosian space. The Zorgar, frustrated by the delays in implementing the cultural exchange program and obtaining the mining rights they demanded, were flexing their military muscle. In a tense meeting with Ambassador Holbrook, Randy received the news he had been dreading. The situation has become too volatile, Holbrook said, his face grave. The human government is considering recalling you, Randy. They're concerned about your safety and the potential for this situation to escalate further. Randy felt his heart sink. He knew leaving now could unravel everything they had worked for. Sir, with all due respect, my presence here is crucial. We're so close to making this work. Holbrook sighed, rubbing his temples. I know, Randy. I've argued the same point. We've reached a compromise. You can stay, but with increased security measures and limited public appearances. As Randy digested this news, Prince Kelvaran entered the room, his face a mask of regal composure despite the stress evident in his posture. Gentlemen, Kelvaran began, I believe I have a solution to our current predicament. I propose that we appoint Vler as the official Eidosian ambassador to Earth. The room fell silent as the implications of this proposal sank in. Randy's mind raced, weighing the potential consequences. Sending Vler to Earth could remove her from immediate danger and potentially strengthen interspecies relations. But it would also mean separating her from her homeworld at a critical juncture. As Randy grappled with his conflicting emotions, his duty to his government, his commitment to the cultural exchange program, and his deepening feelings for Vler, he realized that the decision before him could change the course of three species' histories. The fate of Eidos, Earth, and the Zorgar Empire hung in the balance, with the looming threat of interstellar war casting a shadow over their efforts. Randy knew that their next moves would be crucial in determining whether their vision of intergalactic cooperation would become a reality or crumble into conflict. As Randy grappled with the weight of Kelvaran's proposal, the room's atmosphere grew thick with tension. The potential appointment of Vler as ambassador to Earth could reshape the delicate balance they had worked so hard to achieve. Before anyone could respond, however, a shrill alarm pierced the air. Proximity alert, announced a computerized voice. Multiple Zorgar vessels detected entering Eidosian space. The room erupted into action. Kelvaran rushed to a nearby console, his tentacles flying over the controls. A holographic display materialized, showing a cluster of red dots approaching Eidos. It's a full battle fleet, Kelvaran said, his voice tight. They're on an intercept course. Randy's mind raced. The situation had escalated far beyond what he had anticipated. He turned to Ambassador Holbrook, whose face had gone pale. Sir, we need to contact Earth immediately. The Zorgar presence here could trigger an interstellar incident. Holbrook nodded grimly. I'll make the call, but Randy, you should know. This complicates things. The human government may insist on your immediate withdrawal. As Holbrook stepped away to confer with Earth, Randy felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Vler beside him, her iridescent scales shimmering with concern. We can't let this derail everything we've worked for, she said, her voice low and determined. Randy nodded, squeezing her hand. We won't, but we need a plan, and fast. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of General Draz Kol, the head of Eidos' military. The general's tentacles writhed with terrifying fury as he addressed Prince Kelvaran. Your Highness, we must act now, Drazikol insisted. A preemptive strike is our only option. We can catch the Zorgar off guard and— No, Randy interjected, drawing surprised looks from the Eidosians. A military response will only escalate the situation. We need diplomacy, not war. Drazkol's eyes narrowed. And what would you suggest, human? That we roll over and allow the Zorgar to intimidate us? Randy took a deep breath, formulating his thoughts. We propose a face-to-face meeting. All three species on neutral ground. A space station, perhaps. The room fell silent as the Adotians considered his words. Vler was the first to speak. It's risky, but it might be our best chance to avoid open conflict. General, prepare a defensive posture, but hold off on any aggressive actions. Droskol bristled but nodded reluctantly. As he left to coordinate the Adosian military response, Randy turned to Vler and Vler. If we're going to make this work, we need to move quickly, he said. We'll need representatives from all three species. Prince Vler, would you be willing to lead the Adosian delegation? Vler's tentacles curled thoughtfully. Yes, I believe my presence would lend the necessary authority to the proceedings. Vler, you should join us as well. Your experience with the cultural exchange program could be invaluable. Vler nodded, her eyes meeting Randy's. And you, Randy, will you represent Earth? Before Randy could respond, Ambassador Holbrook returned, his face grim. Earth has agreed to the summit, but they're sending a full diplomatic team. Randy, they want you there, but in an advisory capacity only. Randy felt a mix of relief and frustration. He was glad to be included, but he knew the limitations of an advisory role. Still, he understood the complexities of the situation. I understand, sir. I'll do whatever I can to help. As they began preparations for the summit, reports came in of the Zorgar delegation. Ambassador Krixthal would be attending, along with their military commander, Warlord Grix Zahn. The inclusion of a high-ranking military official sent a clear message about the Zorgar's intentions. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. As Randy helped coordinate logistics for the Adosian delegation's departure, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something about Lord Kazanar's sudden silence didn't sit right with him. His suspicions were confirmed when Jack Hawkins burst into the room, out of breath and wide-eyed. Randy, Vler, we've got a problem. Kazanar's making his move. He's taken members of the Royal Council hostage and declared martial law in the capital. The news hit like a shockwave. Vler's tentacles coiled tightly, his voice strained as he spoke. This complicates matters significantly. If Kazanar controls the government, any agreement we reach at the summit could be invalidated. Randy's mind raced, weighing their options. They couldn't abandon the summit, not with the Zorgar fleet bearing down on them, but leaving Eidos in the midst of a coup was equally dangerous. Vler stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. We must proceed with the summit. It's our best chance to prevent war. Jack, can you organize resistance against Kazanar? Jack nodded firmly. The people are with you, Vler. We'll do what we can to undermine Kazanar's authority. As final preparations were made for their departure, Randy pulled Vler aside. Are you sure about this? Going to the summit means leaving your planet in the middle of a crisis. Vler's eyes met his, filled with a mix of purpose and fear. I have to believe that achieving peace will be more powerful than any coup. We have to try, Randy. Randy nodded, his hand finding hers. As their fingers intertwined, human and Adosian, he felt a surge of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead at the summit, they would face them together. The Adosian delegation boarded their ship, the sleek vessel rising smoothly from the launch pad. As they broke through Eidos's atmosphere, the vastness of space stretched out before them. Somewhere out there, the Zorgar fleet waited, and beyond that, a neutral space station where the fate of 3 species would be decided. Randy gazed out the viewport, his mind already strategizing for the negotiations ahead. The ship accelerated, carrying them towards an uncertain future and the greatest challenge of their lives. The ship docked at the Adosian spaceport with a gentle thud. As the airlock hissed open, Randy and Vler exchanged a look of apprehension and tenacity. They had succeeded in averting war at the summit, but now faced the daunting task of implementing the tri-species agreement on a planet in turmoil. As they stepped onto Adosian soil, they were greeted by a scene of controlled chaos. Security forces were everywhere, their tentacles gripping weapons as they maintained order. In the distance, plumes of smoke rose from isolated pockets of resistance. Prince Vler strode towards them, his regal bearing at odds with the fatigue evident in his eyes. "Welcome back," he said, his voice low. As you can see, we have much work ahead of us. Randy nodded, taking in the situation. What's our first priority? Stabilizing the political situation, Kelvaran replied. Lord Khazanar and his inner circle have been arrested, but his supporters are still causing trouble. We need to establish legitimacy quickly. Vler stepped forward, her scales shimmering with purpose. And the cultural exchange program? We can't lose sight of our long-term goals. Kelvaran's tentacles curled in agreement. Indeed, that's why I'm tasking both of you with these responsibilities. Randy, I need you to help set up the Idosian branch of the Tri-Species Council. Vler, you'll spearhead the reforms to our educational system. As they made their way to the palace, Randy's comm device buzzed. It was a message from Earth, offering him a senior diplomatic position. He felt a pang of conflict, torn between his duty to his home planet and his commitment to Eidos. With a sigh, he pocketed the device, deciding to postpone his decision until things were more stable. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Randy worked tirelessly to establish the Idosian branch of the Tri-Species Council, carefully selecting representatives from various social classes. He spent long hours mediating discussions, smoothing over centuries-old grudges, and finding common ground among disparate groups. One evening, as he pored over candidate profiles, Vler entered his office. Her scales were dulled with exhaustion, but her eyes shone with excitement. Randy, you need to see this, she said, activating a holographic display. The image showed a new school in one of Eidos's poorest districts. Children from the slums mingled with those from wealthier families, all eagerly learning about Earth and Zorgar cultures alongside their own. It's working, Vler said softly. We're actually bridging the gap. Randy smiled, feeling a surge of pride and affection. You're making a real difference, Vler. Their moment was interrupted by an alert. The first group of human and Zorgar visitors had arrived. Randy hurried to organize a welcome ceremony, determined to make a good first impression. The event was held in the Grand Plaza of the capital city. Randy watched nervously as the visitors filed in, their eyes wide as they took in the alien architecture and the sea of tentacled Idosians. He was just beginning his welcome speech when a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. A group of Idosian extremists surged forward, waving signs and shouting slogans against the invasion of outsiders. Randy's heart raced as he saw the panic spreading through the crowd. But before he could react, the security team sprang into action, forming a barrier between the protesters and the visitors. Randy locked eyes with the lead security officer and gave a subtle nod. Together, they managed to isolate and remove the extremists without violence, quickly restoring calm to the gathering. As the ceremony resumed, Randy noticed looks of respect from both the visitors and the Idosians. This small victory had demonstrated the potential of their alliance. Weeks turned into months and progress continued. The joint mining operation on Eidos's moon faced initial hurdles as cultural misunderstandings led to arguments and work stoppages. Randy implemented cross-cultural training programs, teaching each species about the other's customs and communication styles. Slowly but surely, productivity improved, and genuine friendships began to form across species lines. The arrival of Ambassador Crixthal marked another milestone. The Zorgar diplomat's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he observed the changes on Eidos. Impressive, he rumbled, watching humans, Idosians, and Zorgar working side by side at a construction site. Perhaps there is more to this alliance than I first believed. As Crixthal shared news of political changes within the Zorgar Empire, Randy felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The threat of war was receding, replaced by genuine cooperation. Yet even as things improved on Eidos, Randy felt a growing tension. Earth was increasing pressure for him to accept the new diplomatic position, to take a larger role in shaping interstellar policy. The thought of leaving Eidos, of leaving Vler, filled him with dread. One evening, as he walked with Vler through the palace gardens, she brought up the subject they'd both been avoiding. "You've received another message from Earth, haven't you?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Randy nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "They want an answer soon. I don't know what to do, Vler. My duty to Earth, my work here on Eidos, my feelings for you. I'm torn in every direction." Vler reached out, her tentacle gently intertwining with his fingers. Whatever you decide, Randy, know that. Her words were cut off by the sudden blare of alarms. Their communicators crackled to life with an urgent message from Prince Kelvaran. Emergency meeting in the war room. Now! As they rushed through the palace corridors, Randy's mind raced. What new crisis could threaten their hard-won peace? The answer awaited them in the war room, where a grim-faced Kelvaran stood before a holographic display. We have a situation, the prince said, his tentacles writhing with agitation. Dr. Zexalor, a radical scientist, has developed a biological weapon. He's threatening to release it unless we dissolve the alliance and expel all off-worlders. The room erupted into chaos as officials argued about how to respond. Randy felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. Everything they had worked for was suddenly at risk. Amidst the commotion, Randy's eyes met Vler's. In that moment, he knew they were thinking the same thing. They had come too far to let it all fall apart now. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the arguments raged on, Randy began to formulate a plan. He caught Crixithal's eye and nodded towards a quiet corner of the room. It was time to put their alliance to the ultimate test. Randy nodded to Crixithal, and they quietly slipped away from the heated debate. In a secluded corner of the war room, Randy laid out his plan. We need a small, elite team to infiltrate Dr. Zexalor's lab, he whispered. I propose the three of us lead it. We have the right combination of skills and authority to handle this. Crixithal's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A risky proposition, but I see the logic. We cannot afford to let this escalate further. As they discussed the details, Vler joined them, her scales shimmering with perseverance. I overheard. Count me in. Within hours, they had assembled a joint task force of human, Edosian, and Zorgar operatives. Intelligence reports pinpointed Dr. Zexalor's hidden laboratory in an abandoned mine deep within Edos's craggy mountains. As their transport craft approached the mine entrance, Randy felt a familiar mix of adrenaline and apprehension. The stakes had never been higher. He glanced at Vler, her presence beside him a comforting constant amidst the uncertainty. The team disembarked, the Edosian members using their tentacles to navigate the rough terrain with ease. Crixithal's exoskeleton gleamed in the dim light as he took point, his Zorgar senses alert for any sign of danger. They entered the mine, the air growing thick and stale. Randy activated his breather unit, the soft hiss of filtered air, a reminder of the alien environment. Vler moved ahead, her natural affinity for Edosian geography guiding them through the twisting tunnels. Suddenly, a series of clicks echoed through the passage. Randy reacted instinctively, pulling Vler back as a section of the floor gave way, revealing a pit of razor-sharp spikes. Booby traps, Crixithal growled. Dr. Zexalor is paranoid and well-prepared. They proceeded with heightened caution, disarming traps and bypassing automated defense systems. Randy marveled at the seamless cooperation between the species, each bringing unique strengths to overcome the challenges. After what felt like hours of tense navigation, they reached a massive steel door. Vler interfaced with the control panel, her tentacles dancing across the alien technology. With a hydraulic hiss, the door slid open, revealing Dr. Zexalor's main chamber. The scene before them was like something out of a nightmare. Dr. Zexalor, his tentacles writhing with manic energy, stood before a towering machine connected to Edos's atmospheric control systems. Vials of sickly green liquid pulsed within the device. You're too late, Dr. Zexalor cackled, his eyes wild. The purification of Edos begins now. Randy stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. Dr. Zexalor, please, think about what you're doing. This weapon won't just harm off-worlders, it will devastate your own people. As Randy spoke, he noticed Vler and Crixithal subtly positioning their teams. He kept Dr. Zexalor's attention focused on him, hoping to buy them time. You don't understand, Dr. Zexalor shouted. This is the only way to preserve our way of life. With a triumphant cry, the mad scientist slammed his tentacle down on a large red button. The machine hummed to life, the vials of bioweapon beginning to drain. Time seemed to slow. Randy's mind raced, analyzing the machine's structure. He spotted a crucial weak point, the power coupling. "Vler!" he shouted. "The power source, third panel from the left." Without hesitation, Vler's tentacles flew across the control panel. Alarms blared as she rerouted power, disrupting the release sequence. Simultaneously, Krixthal leapt into action. With lightning speed, he closed the distance to Dr. Zexalor. The Zorgar's powerful limbs subdued the scientist, pinning him to the ground. Randy rushed to the machine, using his knowledge of Earth tech to interface with the alien system. His fingers flew across the keypad, overriding the release mechanism. With a final beep, the machine powered down, the deadly vials still mostly full. As Krixthal's team secured Dr. Zexalor and his followers, Randy and Vler carefully contained the bioweapon. The immediate danger had passed, but the weight of how close they'd come to disaster hung heavy in the air. While securing the lab, they discovered Dr. Zexalor's research data. As they began to decrypt it, their eyes widened in surprise. "This is incredible," Vler breathed, her tentacles skimming through the information. His work on genetic manipulation, it could revolutionize treatment for genetic disorders across all our species. Randy nodded, a mix of emotions washing over him. It's ironic. In his misguided attempt to keep us apart, he may have given us something that will bring us even closer together. As they emerged from the mine, weary but victorious, they were met with a hero's welcome. News of their success had spread quickly, and crowds of Edotians, humans, and Zorgar alike cheered their return. In the days that followed, the averted crisis became a rallying point for the Alliance. The potential medical breakthroughs from Dr. Zexalor's research ignited a new spirit of cooperation. Prince Kelvaran called Randy and Vler to a private meeting. Tentacles curled in excitement, he outlined his vision. "It's time to formalize our alliance. I propose we establish an interstellar federation, with Eidos as its founding member." Randy felt a surge of excitement, but also a pang of conflict. Earth's offer of a senior diplomatic position still loomed. As if reading his thoughts, Kelvaran continued. "Randy, I want you to be our permanent human ambassador and a key figure in this new federation. Your unique perspective and experience make you ideal for the role." Randy's mind whirled with the implications. This was more than a career opportunity. It was a chance to shape the future of interstellar relations. And he realized, with a warmth spreading through his chest, it meant he could stay on Eidos, with Vler. As he opened his mouth to accept, Vler interjected. "I have a proposal as well," she said, her eyes shining with purpose. "We should establish a tri-species university here on Eidos, a place for cultural exchange, shared research, and training future diplomats." Kelvaran's tentacles curled with approval. "Brilliant idea, Vler. We'll present both proposals at the upcoming ceremony." As they left the prince's chambers, Randy pulled Vler aside. In the quiet of a palace alcove, he took her hands in his. "Vler, I've made my decision. I'm staying on Eidos. As ambassador, yes, but more importantly, to be with you." Volar's scales shimmered with joy. She leaned in, her forehead touching his in an intimate Eidosian gesture. "I was hoping you'd say that," she whispered. Their moment was interrupted by a commotion in the main hall. Ambassador Krixthal had arrived with news from the Zorgar homeworld. As they hurried to meet him, Randy felt a surge of optimism. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not just as a couple, but as part of a growing interstellar community.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.